Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Early Childhood Recommendations panel for the month of July. This is the first meeting of our new year. We are very fortunate to have new members on the panel as well as some returning members, and so I'm excited to hear all of the wonderful things that we're going to accomplish this year. Next slide. This is a remote meeting. Today's meeting materials are posted on the panel meetings webpage at kschildrenscabinet.org. Panel members will clearly identify themselves when they begin, and they can use the raise hands feature to show that you're ready to share. That just helps Lindsay and I know that you want to say something. So if you could just click that feature so we know we don't want to miss anybody's comments. So for today's agenda, we have the welcome, which I've just done. We'll approve the July agenda, the July meeting minutes. We don't have anybody for the Kansas Open Forum, but I'll talk a little bit about that. We'll have an overview of the panel meeting procedures, talk about our panel SharePoint hub. We have a recommendation from the Family Friendly Workplace work group, and then we'll talk about bright spots, upcoming meetings, and then our meeting will adjourn. So this is the time I'm going to give you a heads up for all panel members to start thinking about amazing things that are happening within your organization or within your community. We want to be able to hear what's going on, and so you have time to think about it. So get ready to share all of the bright spots and wonderful things that are going on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to approve the July agenda. So Lindsay sent out the agenda for all of us to review. And so if there are no revisions, may I have a motion to approve the July agenda as presented?
This is Maritas. I move to approve the July agenda.
Perfect. May I have a second?
This is Karen McClure. I second.
Great. All those in favor say aye or thumbs up. Any opposed, same sign. For our new members, we just get used to having thumbs up in our meetings, right? That's just kind of how it works virtually. So, all right. And so we also had our, next slide, sorry. Minutes, I'm sorry. We have our meeting minutes that were also sent. We had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes for the month of June. If there are no revisions, may I have a motion to approve the June minutes as presented?
This is Brenda Bandy. I make a motion to approve the June minutes as presented.
Thank you. May I have a second?
This is Natalie McLean. I'll second.
Thank you, Natalie. All those in favor, thumbs up. Any opposed, same sign. Great, perfect. So we don't have anybody right now today that is going to present to the Kansas Open Forum, but for anyone who is watching virtually, we want you to know that Kansans are encouraged to submit comments through the Kansas Open Forum comment form by 5 o'clock the day preceding each meeting to share written comments or sign up to share verbal comments with the panel during this portion of the meeting. Anything that you think would be interesting for the panel to know about, ideas that you have, recommendations you have, things that are going on within your community that you think that we would want to know, please, we always look forward to being able to hear from people in, across the state of Kansas. And so anything is welcome. And so again, please share information by 5 p.m. the day preceding each meeting so that we can then share information with everybody on the panel. Next, we're going to hear from Melissa Rooker, who is the Executive Director of the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund, and she is going to give you a welcome and overview of our panel.
Thank you, Cornelia. It's my pleasure to be with you all this morning. We appreciate the work the panel does to support the Cabinet in our role as the State Early Childhood Advisory Council. So, Lindsay, next slide. I will just say that the role of this panel is a standing committee of the Kansas Children's Cabinet, and your job is to help us with identifying strategies and approaches that can help achieve the goals in our All In for Kansas Kids statewide strategic plan. So we have updated the 2024 statewide early childhood needs assessment for the ecosystem, and we consider that the constellation of programs and services that exist across multiple state agencies and other outside partner organizations that all come together to provide support for Kansas children and their families. State level coordination is a major component of the strategic plan. It's goal number one. We know that we have a lot of work to do to break down silos and improve the coordination of these services and transitions for families and referrals and availability and all of those things that we have a system that provides a wealth of services, but oftentimes on the outside, the experience of our families is that it can be very complicated to connect to the right service at the appropriate time, just because of the coordination system. So our work is ongoing. We have made progress since the first All-In for Kansas Kids strategic plan was introduced in 2020 and adopted. We will be later this year adopting an updated 5-year strategic plan. So stay tuned for that, because it will reflect the progress that we have made and help us chart the course for the future in terms of the work that still needs to be done. We can go to the next slide. So as I was saying when I started, that this panel exists as part of a structure that stems from Executive Order 2002. So it was introduced by Governor Kelly in 2020, which designated the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund as the state's official early childhood advisory council. This is a requirement of the federal Head Start legislation, and we had gone a number of years with no official entity serving as the advisory council. So the governor took a look at the duties of the Children's Cabinet that are outlined in state statute. And a key part of what we exist to do is to coordinate between agencies to identify barriers and gaps and challenges and to make recommendations. The thing is that the federal Head Start legislation has some very specific roles and responsibilities outlined for the advisory council, and the membership of the Children's Cabinet Board does not reflect the right personnel, the right organizations and the right expertise to actually serve fully in that role. So the executive order includes a section that created the directive that you see on screen to create a standing committee of the Children's Cabinet, which is called the Early Childhood Recommendations Panel, that will be populates. The whole application process that you all went through in spring was because we needed to ensure that we had the categories and the specific organizations represented that are outlined in statute as necessary. So we have a sizable panel. I think we've seated more than 40 people on this panel. About half or a little more are returning, and we thank you for the time that you've devoted. And then we also appreciate a brand new slate of members that are new this year. We look forward to working with you, and we appreciate your time as well. The panel's role is to advise the Children's Cabinet. So you all have the subject matter expertise. You all are part of the right organizations to come together. The purpose is to do some analysis and strategic planning and thinking about challenges that you're seeing in your everyday work, or to really, we ask that you use the strategic plan as the touch point, as the guide. So if there are specific elements, goals, strategies in our strategic plan that this group thinks would make a good project to hone in on, we welcome that. And I take a light touch to the work of the panel. You all have a very capable leader and your chair, Cornelia Stevens, and support from the KU Center for Public Partnerships and Research, which is a team that's deeply embedded in the work and helps draft the strategic plan. So you all are free to identify your focus areas of work. And then the work groups and the process of these monthly panel meetings is to hone recommendations and bring them forward when they are ready for review by the Children's Cabinet in its role as the Early Childhood Recommendations Panel. So when you bring a recommendation forward, it is not this panel making a recommendation that says the Children's Cabinet should do A, B, or C. It is what I'm looking for a recommendation to be ready to bring up, to elevate to the Cabinet, is a recommendation that is coming from the advisory council to the system at large. So it isn't, you're not recommending that the Cabinet does certain things. You're ready to bring us a recommendation when you have something that you want to get, consider it the good housekeeping stamp of approval for us to say, this is what we think those participants in the early childhood ecosystem should be doing. And so I appreciate all the time that goes in. There's no hurry. There's no minimum number of recommendations that we need to see, at least so many per year. There are no rules. When you are ready with a recommendation, we are happy to receive it. And I think you're going to hear a project today that has come to fruition, which I'm pleased to see. And I look forward to working with all of you over the coming year. So Cornelia, I'm going to turn it back to you and leave you guys to your work. But you can always invite me to come participate if you need input along the way. But I hope this is a fulfilling year for everyone who's serving, and I look forward to hearing more from you in the future. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. So we'll have an opportunity now to go over the meeting procedures for the panel. As we're stated, we do have several new members that are here, who are here this morning, and we want to go over everything just so you know what to expect throughout the year. This is also a good refresher for our returning members in terms of the processes and how things go. Next slide. So as part of the Open Meetings Act, it requires that the panel be subject. Executive Order 2002 requires that the panel be subject to the Kansas Open Meetings Act. So what this means that is a representative government is dependent upon an informed electorate. The policy of the state of Kansas is that meetings for the conduct of governmental affairs and transaction of government business be open to the public. So what this means is that all of our meetings are live streamed. People are able to see and hear what is discussed in our meetings. The chat feature is actually going to be disabled, so you will not be able to chat amongst each other during the meetings because, again, that violates the Open Forums Act because there can't be side conversations that are happening in this meeting. And so that's why everything is, again, available for the public to be able to see. Next slide. Typical procedures for the Kansas Open Forum, and this Open Forum, again, is an opportunity for people in Kansas to share information that they'd like, as I mentioned in our introduction, share information about things that we should consider as we're looking at priorities for the panel for the state of Kansas. Each speaker, if you are given the opportunity to speak in person, is going to be allowed to speak for 3 minutes. Panel members may ask clarifying questions of the person making the presentation. The speaker will have up to 1 minute to respond, and the presiding officer may grant additional time if needed. Information can also be submitted to the panel in writing, in written or an electric form. This information shall be included in the meeting minutes, and we will then also have the opportunity to discuss that recommendation, even if it's submitted in writing. Following the Kansas Open Forum portion of the agenda, the presiding officer will acknowledge the participant and announce that the panel will determine if any of the issues will be addressed in future meetings. Sometimes we may have someone that just wants to give us something for consideration. There's something that could actually result in an action item, and something that we believe as a panel is something that we should be investigating and looking further into, or maybe finding a presenter, to speak more about, et cetera. And so, we do take all of the recommendations that are given, seriously. We want to make sure that we're giving it the due diligence that we need. And so please know, that you do have the opportunity again to speak either in person or submit comments in writing. And we look forward to getting any information from anybody that's interested in Kansas. Next slide. Voting procedures. So a panel will strive first for a consensus in decision making. If consensus is not possible, participants may call for a vote. Each panel member is entitled to one vote on each matter submitted to a panel. A vote of 2/3 of those members present is necessary to approve any formal action taken by the panel pursuant to Article 4, Panel Actions. The votes of the panel members participating virtually shall be included on matters subject to a vote. Next slide. For panel recommendations will include the following. First, clear identification of the entity that will receive the recommendation. Background information explaining the issue that includes description of how considerations of equity have been informed with this recommendation, description of how Kansas families have shaped this recommendation, description of how the councils, committees, or work groups with expertise, experience, or jurisdiction related to the issue have been involved. And as a reminder, formal recommendations are not required for the work of the panel. So later in our meeting, we'll talk about, how our work groups, will then be determined. And there will be some where the work group is not going to have a recommendation more than a formal recommendation, more than they'll have opportunity for discussion, maybe opportunities for new collaboration, something like that. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be a formal recommendation, but those are the processes, the things that are needed should you decide to actually submit a formal recommendation. So again, they are not required for all work of the panel. Other routes like collaborating with other organizations, government groups, or submitting information to the All in Kansas Kids website are all equally as important. So recommendations, but also it's open to whatever it is that your end result is for the work of your work group. Next slide. In terms of system collaboration, the panel may contact other councils, committees, and work groups with expertise, experience, or jurisdiction related to a particular issue to share information gathered and identify opportunities for further progress. The panel may also contact other councils, committees, and work groups to request additional information for feedback on draft recommendations. This is definitely going to be something that you may consider as you're looking at your work groups, because we may find as we're working on something, we're aware that there's also some other outside entity that's working on the same exact thing. And so it will be really great for us to collaborate versus all of us doing something. I mean, like we may be going right and they may be going left, and we might as well work together to make sure that we're all on the same page. And they may have more experience in doing this, may have more expertise. And so bringing them in so that way it gives us a larger voice also in the work that we're trying to do. The panel may provide recommendations, information, or requests for information or feedback at any point during the year. So the recommendations or anything doesn't have to wait until the end of the year. At any time, if your work groups are at a place where you have something that you want to present to the panel, you have the opportunity to do that. There's not a scheduled time. Next slide. In terms of panel discussion, so we are going to be hearing, the new All In for Kansas strategic plan will be available following the August 2nd Children's Cabinet meeting. And the panel is going to have an opportunity to determine the work priorities at the August 16th meeting. So what we do in determining the work groups in part is look at the items identified on the All In for Kansas strategic plan and pull from there the things that we believe as a panel we want to prioritize and that we think that we could actually make meaningful change or recommendations or whatnot as a work group. And so, so be prepared, like after when we have the meeting on August 16th, then we'll have some discussion about, what work groups do we currently have in existence? Are those work groups going to remain? Do we feel like we need to have a different work group? Or are we still not done with the work from that initial work group? And so you'll have the opportunity to do that. But we wanted to also open it up and give an opportunity for you as panel members to talk about if there's anything, even though we don't have the work of the strategic plan yet, is there anything you're passionate about that you're hoping that we can prioritize this year? Something that maybe if you're an existing member, something that we didn't touch on last year that you were hoping that we would, or if you're new, is there an area, some initiative, something that you are passionate about that you're hoping is going to be addressed this year on the panel? We'd just like to open this up for panel members to be able to discuss. Who would like to go first? And I know this question was just kind of thrown at you, in terms of, thinking about like what the priorities are. And so if you don't have anything right now, that's a priority. You're just here to kind of shape and guide and give feedback in terms of what happens in our early childhood system in Kansas. That's good as well. But just know that, again, we will have an opportunity at this August 16th meeting to then dig deeper into the strategic plan and identify anything that's a priority. Also, if there are any governance groups or organizations that you would like to present to the panel, do you have any recommendations now? What Lindsay does is she takes the recommendations from us. There is when I talk about the SharePoint hub, there's a place where we can also put information in terms of, people that maybe we would like to hear from. But do you have anybody right now that you think that would be an organization or group or whatnot that would be good to present to, good information for us to have for a panel where maybe we should reach out to them and present? Yes, Brenda.
I saw Jarvis put his camera on. I would like to hear from Jarvis. With the new regulations that are coming out, when I think about organizations that this panel should hear from, I think the timing is right for them to really help us to make sense of the new recommendations and have a deeper understanding of that. And then also the topic areas or focus. I would really like more information on home visiting programs. I know that's part of the early childhood ecosystem that we talk about, but I feel that oftentimes we are deep in the weeds of childcare, and I'm not sure that we've given as much thought to the home visiting aspect of the early childhood system. Thank you.
Good. Very good. Thank you for that, Brenda. Anyone else? Any other recommendations of ideas or initiatives, things that we should prioritize this year, or any groups or organizations or whatnot we would like to invite to present?
Yes, this is Larry Lewis with Growing Futures Early Education. Please forgive, you might hear the baby in the background crying, so I'm sorry for that. But I may have missed this, but mental health supports. When I think about my team, I see that as a big challenge around, as it relates to retention, recruiting, having the ability to have some supports around mental health and really focusing in on that so that they can then do the work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good. Thank you, Larry. Dr. Willer.
I actually have a question for Larry. Is he speaking of mental health for the adults working in that area, or mental health supports for children in those areas? Or both?
Great question. If I had a magic wand, I'd say both. But I do believe that the mental health of our actual professionals, our educators that are doing the work, would be a great support for them, that I believe would also support our children's mental health if they have that quality interaction day to day with a educator that's in a space of wellness.
Very good. Thank you for clarifying. Any other thoughts in terms of areas we should prioritize or any groups or organizations that we would like to invite to present? Okay, if none, know that at any time we definitely encourage our panel members to share if there's something that's come up that you feel like we really need to put at the forefront of work that we do that you want to be able to recommend. If you want to present yourself, and you have things that are happening within your organization or in the work that you do that you feel like would be helpful for us as a panel to know, it doesn't have to be an outside organization. You yourself can say that I am the outside organization and I want to present and I want to talk about the work that we're doing because it's important for the state of Kansas. And so, those are all always welcome ideas and opportunities. Next slide. We do have a panel SharePoint hub. And when Lindsay sent out the materials for today, she did send a link for the panel SharePoint hub. This is where you'll be able to find all of our meeting materials, which includes agendas, minutes, recordings of our meetings, resources, etc. The All In for Kansas Tactic Kids work group information, so overviews in terms of our work groups, resources, meeting notes, etc. from the work groups. And then any news and updates, panel updates, webinars, early childhood system system updates, anything like that or whatnot. So all of that is there for you as a panel member to be able to hopefully give you hands-on, information that to be able to help you kind of guide the work that you're doing, provide more information, or at least it has it all streamlined in one location. So you don't have to kind of search everywhere to get the information needed for the work that we're doing. Next slide.
Cornelia, if you are open to it, I would love to do a quick just walkthrough to if anyone is not familiar with the SharePoint Hub. If I could do that live, I'd love to. But
that'd be very helpful. Go for it.
Give me just a moment to get it pulled up. Okay, so everyone should have access to our panel SharePoint Hub. Basically, this is an internal website and collaboration space for you all to utilize as a panel. I try to do my best to make sure to include all of the information that is relevant to our meetings or other aspects of the work. So for instance, under the news, one of the main things that shows up in the news is panel meeting sort of summaries. So for instance, I shared a link with you all in our last email about the June 21st panel meeting and recommended that you might want to take a look at this if you weren't actively participating in the meeting. Because this was when all of our work groups gave updates on progress and where they sort of ended up at the end of the year. So it's a good opportunity to hear about what a lot of the work that happened at the through the panel in this last panel calendar year. So as I mentioned in my email, if you don't have access, if this isn't working, I added all of your email addresses, but please let me know if you can't access it because this is a key resource for you as a panel member as you are, navigating your time this year. So I'll always have the meeting materials and a quick summary and a link to watch the recording of the meeting. And then sometimes if we have extra details or information or resources, I'll add a few more notes and links, those sort of things. So this is a really great resource if you need to go back and revisit some information that happened during a meeting, or if you aren't able to attend a meeting, this is a great place to go and watch that. The other things that I will post here, and I certainly rely on you all as well, are webinars that are coming up that panel members might be interested in looking at. So if you look a little bit further back under the news, we had an opportunity for panel members and those in the system to provide input for the All In for Kansas Kids strategic plan. There was a webinar in March that had connected to some of the work the panel had worked on And so I've shared that information. So keep an eye out here for any information. And if you have things that should be included, please send those to me. And we will make sure that we get those added to the SharePoint. In addition, there's some quick links. So I do want to point out one piece on the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund website. If you navigate to the About, there's a whole section on the Children's Cabinet website about the recommendations panel, including many of the pieces of information that were talked about today are included in the roles, norms, and procedures. There is the executive order that was mentioned. You can see sort of the governance structure for the state of Kansas for early childhood. And then all of you have had a chance to review and provide updates to the panel member bios. So this is information that we are getting updated with our new panel for this year. And hopefully shortly after this meeting, we'll get this live and updated so that anyone in the system can see who our members are and connections. Additionally, there is information about panel meetings. So if you are ever wanting to direct someone to be able to watch one of the meetings that you are participating in, or if you think it might be interesting or helpful for them, we include a link to watch the YouTube, the live stream, and we'll share information and resources here. If you scroll down a little ways, you can see the Early Childhood Governance Summit that the panel hosted in 2024, I think in February, and then some past recommendations that came through the panel and then were adopted by the Children's Cabinet. So there's some good resources here. Another link I want to point your attention to, which is on your panel SharePoint, is the All In for Kansas Kids website. We had a nice presentation about this at a panel meeting a little ways back. I could certainly direct you to that if you want to hear more information about that, but this is a resource for everyone in the system. There are so many resources. So there's many places, and if you think there's other links that should be included here that would be helpful for you and other panel members to have quick access to, please let me know. So some information there, a reminder that if you are wanting to submit an agenda item or a resource or a request for things to be included on the panel, you can email me, but I also have a cute little form, so you can click on the form and submit it there. I'm a fan of forms. If you are ever having trouble accessing our meeting or need a reminder about what our meeting schedule looks like, we have all of the meetings here listed at the bottom. So that's a good quick resource to grab. I try my best to be available to help tech support when we are kind of going live with meetings, but it can be a little bit challenging to be in both places at once. Under documents are all the meeting materials. So if you ever want to go back and find an agenda or the slide deck or any resources that are presented, you can find that here. And then we do have pages for each of the work groups that were active this past year. So this was some kind of starting information and background and resources. So if you're wanting to explore a little bit about the focus of the work groups from this past year, feel free to peruse. And again, let us know if you have questions. This site is really intended to be a resource for you, not just for me to share information with you, but for you to utilize in all of those ways. So this can be a collaboration space to do document sharing with your work groups. This can be a space to make sure to share information out with other panel members. So always feel free to reach out if there's a way that we can make this better for you as a panel. Very happy to do so. Are there any questions for me before I turn it back to Cornelia? Okay, I will get back to our screen share of the PowerPoint. And thank you for the time to kind of share and walk through that all with you.
Well, thank you for providing the overview. I think it's actually it's laid out very well and very easy. It's very accessible. And so you guys have done a very nice job in creating that. So thank you. Next slide. So we are going to hear from an actual and receive an actual recommendation. So for those of you who are new, who haven't seen a recommendation happen, this will be your chance. And so Ms. Brenda, no pressure at all, but we're going to go ahead and pass it over to Ms. Brenda Bandy, who is going to share the recommendation from the Family Friendly Workplace Work Group.
Great. Thank you, Cornelia. This is Brenda Bandy, and I am speaking on behalf of the entire work group. I think our next slide maybe outlines all of our partners or who all has been on the work group. Oh, there's the title for that. So to promote family-friendly workplaces, just to get us oriented why we have a work group on this, it is one of the strategies in the current strategic plan. So it's 4.2. So we proudly call ourselves the 4.2 work group. So if you hear us say 4.2, that's our name. That's our nickname. Next slide. These are all of the work group members. And I invite Maritas and Mallory, who are on the call, if you can, to put your cameras on, wave to the group. You all have done a mighty job. Hey, Maritas. Hey, Mallory. You have done great, great work. Dana is our fearless leader and is not able to be with us because he's traveling today. But everyone on this slide has been an active member of the work group. And we have met not only after these standing meetings, you know, we are given additional time after this meeting ends to do our work, but we also have convened meetings in between as well, sometimes as briefly as 30 minutes. It was amazing what we could get done in 30 minutes when we gathered. We also benefited from one of the things that Cornelia described earlier, and that is bringing in outside experts. So we had Carrie from the Kansas Department of Commerce joined us, and that really allowed us to ask questions about what the capacity of the Department of Commerce is to work with employers in the state of Kansas to implement family-friendly practices. So this is a work group. It also stands on the shoulders of the previous work group. So just to give you all who are new, hope that sometimes it takes 2 years. And so I was a part of the work group for the previous year. We had a recommendation, or we thought we did. We turned it in and we got great feedback from Melissa Rooker. And we really took that and that's what we really worked on over the next year. So sometimes it was, you know, thinking we had something finished and then getting the feedback and realizing that we needed to do some clarification. So it was actually a 2-year process. And I thank those of you who were on the previous work group as well. So next slide. Thanks, Lindsay. So this is the background, and I think that many of you on this call understand the important connection between how families are treated in the workplace and their children, right? There's this integral connection between reducing the stress of parents in the workplace. So this was identified in the previous needs assessment, which is why it became Strategic Plan 4.2, and it was again identified in the 2024 needs assessment. And you'll see the quote there, the need for broader reach for family-friendly workplace policies. So to make sure that employers in Kansas treat their employees fairly when it comes to family-friendly policies. So the findings were this interconnectedness that we all know about between workplace and child development. And this is something that the Kansas Power of the Positive, which is a group that's been around for 10 years, has really brought to the forefront in describing how it reduces adverse childhood experiences by reducing stress for parents in the workplace. So if you're not familiar with their work, I encourage you to check out the Kansas Power of the Positive, led by the Kansas Children's Service League. The third point there is by establishing these family-friendly policies, employers are going to benefit as well by participation of parents in the workforce. So it's really a win-win. We know that there's greater retention, greater recruitment to families, which reduces overall costs for the labor in the workforce. The next point is that the approach promotes economic stability, both for employers and employees, which benefits our state overall. And this recommendation would contribute to positive outcomes for children, because we know when families have economic stability and reduced stress, it's a win-win for everyone. So that's the background. I think we all know it intuitively from our own personal experiences, but this was informed by the needs assessments as well. So next slide is the official recommendation that was distilled down to the Children Cabinet in its role as the Early Childhood Advisory Council recommends the adoption of 2 existing resources, which is the Family Friendly Workplace Survey This is from the Kansas Power of the Positive work. It's a survey that businesses sign up for and their employees take, not the business, but the employees take, to report on how they're experiencing family-friendly policies in the workplace. That survey then informs the employer's practices. And that's what Kansas Power of the Positive has been really good about, giving that feedback to employers to help them improve their practices. And then we have a second resource, which is the Guide to Family Forward Workplaces. And this is really a template for businesses that are wanting to dive into this to give them the tools to do that. There's an assessment survey in there, this time for the employer, to really dive into 4 key policies: paid leave, childcare access, flexible scheduling, and accommodations for pregnant and lactating employees. So that guide is really a tool that employers can use. And we know that over the course of time, more tools may be developed as well. So the recommendation is that the cabinet recommends adoption of these 2 existing tools for employers to use to select and implement family-friendly policies best suited to their workplace, and encourages Kansas employers to implement family-friendly workplace practices as appropriate for their business to strengthen families, businesses, and the Kansas economy. And the cabinet will include these 2 resources in the All In for Kansas Kids website that we've been hearing about, and encourage partners and state agencies such as Labor and Commerce to help employers implement family-friendly policies. So we think kind of what Melissa mentioned earlier, that stamp of approval, so that other state agencies can take up this call to action to elevate family-friendly policies and working with employers. So that's the recommendation. Next steps is that Melissa Rooker is going to bring this recommendation formally to the cabinet at their August 2nd meeting for their consideration and hopefully adoption. And then also our work group, the 4.2 work group, is going to remain in place because our next task is really to define a designation. We think that having a statewide designation, hopefully administered by a state agency, that would, this is kind of what we're thinking, that could evolve, could really be meaningful in elevating family forward practices, and then a social media campaign. And we have a little bit of experience with that, with the Family Forward Workplace campaign that was done last spring. And so we hope to be able to expand on that work that was already done. So this work group will continue. And those of you who are new, this is a shameless plug to please join 4.2. We have a lot of fun. We get things done, and we make good use of your time. So there's my shameless plug. Was not a bullet point, but there you go. Okay, next is the official vote. So this is maybe the first time that the panel is considering a recommendation that would go to the Children's Cabinet. So Cornelia, I'm going to turn to you as the chair to guide us through this more official portion of this.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Brenda, for the recommendations for the presentation. Excited to, for all of this to come to fruition should the Children's Cabinet, decide to vote forward. So do we have a motion to accept the recommendation as presented by Brenda or by the Family Friendly Workplace Work Group?
Mm-hmm.
Make a motion that we accept the family-friendly workplace as presented.
Perfect. May I have a second?
I will second that motion.
Perfect. Open for discussion. Does anybody have questions, comments, any kind of feedback at all for Brenda or for anyone on the work group regarding the information that was shared? Dr. Wheeler?
Did your group talk at all about suggestions for, or maybe it's included in those recommendations documents, ways for businesses to supplement, to pay for the cost of some of those things? Was that part of your conversation?
No, I mean, honestly, and Maritas and Mallory, please feel free to chime in. And Melissa is also on the call list too. Sorry about that. No, we really did not look at the economics of this. It was because the benefits, the costs are so low to implementing most of these, and the economic benefits are already present for the employer, so that it's not a net negative for most employers to adopt family-friendly workplaces, because they're going to have lower healthcare costs, greater retention and recruitment. So the minimal cost to implement these things has not been we haven't seen that as a barrier. Now, we know there's the tax credit for childcare access, and that is included in the guide for family forward workplaces, the existing tax credit that was passed a couple of years ago. So we recognize that the employers can contribute and that they do get a tax benefit, and we just are elevating what's already there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question. And if you have ideas or if you think that's something, please join our work group. We would love to hear more. And even if you want to just come once, and we can talk more about that.
Any other questions or comments for the Family Friendly Workplace group? If none, for our final vote, all those in favor, thumbs up. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And so we will be passing this on to Melissa, who will bring it forth to the Kansas Children's Cabinet at their meeting. And hopefully this will be voted and move forward. So thank you again for all of the good work that you have done, and again for your presentation today. Next slide. So, panel members, you received a heads up earlier when we first began our meeting to think about bright spots, to think about things that are happening within your organization, your community, etc. And so this is the opportunity for you to share. And so who has any bright spots that you would like to share with the work group this morning? Brenda?
Oh my goodness. I am sorry I'm doing so much of the talking today. It was not intentional. But because we have so many new members today, I did want to mention an opportunity. The Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition has several sections, two of which may be of interest to this group. We have a childcare section that meets virtually every other month. It's led by Chris Nicholson with Childcare Aware, but it's specifically an opportunity every other month to dive into how infant feeding is supported in the childcare space. And so this is where we create tools and toolkits, resources, trainings, specifically to support the breastfeeding family in the childcare setting. The second one is a public health section. So those of you who are with home visiting programs, several of you have been invited already to present to the public health section. It's a great opportunity for our home visiting programs to do the same. How do we integrate breastfeeding into home visiting programs? So those are two sections, and I will email that how to join those sections to Lindsay to include in the notes. They are virtual and they meet every other month over the lunch hour. So on a predetermined date. I won't go into details, but thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Anybody else? Do we have any other bright spots to share this morning? Jarvis?
Yeah, so I kind of piggybacking off what Brenda said not too long ago about our new regulations. We've held a few webinars so far, and we were surprised. We had, I think, 3 or 4 sessions. I think 4 sessions so far. The first 3, we had 400 to 500 providers show up to each one of those. And so that was amazing to see. And so from that, yeah, we've actually sent out communications. We've added, I think, 4 more. And we'll continue to do this all the way through the rest of the year, but we've added several more webinars that we're going to have. But yeah, to see that many providers show up on those occasions, that was really great for us to see. And Melissa and her team have done a great job of getting on and answering questions. And from that, we're going to create some FAQs from all the questions we get to send out. But we're going to continue to have those webinars and send out communications and continue to answer questions. But that's been a really bright spot for us the past couple of weeks.
I did have an opportunity to attend one of the webinars, and it was actually very well presented. Loved the information that was shared, made it very easily understandable. So good job to you and your team. Very good. Dr. Wheeler.
So this is an ARG organization, but so I'm superintendent of schools, but I'm also a mama to a 4-year-old. And we've accessed the Sunflower Summer provided by the Chamber of Commerce multiple times this summer, and really tried to promote that within our community as well. We know that when it comes to reading, background knowledge is huge and important. And just the opportunity for kids to go visit some places. I mean, especially in rural Kansas, those opportunities aren't always available and they're expensive. And so we've really appreciated the opportunity to participate in that. And I know that's not a work necessarily of this group, but the chances for families to travel together and the fact that it not only provides free tickets for the child, but also tickets for two parents or two adults, so a mom and a grandma, all of those kinds of things. I really think that's a huge value to our early childhood families.
Agreed. No, thank you for sharing. I have the opportunity to take my grandson to a children's museum, with that. And so, so definitely understand what you're saying. So thank you for that. Any other bright spots? Brenda.
I'm just leaning in to
Lean
today.
right in.
I'm
It is
sorry.
okay. Just lean in.
Well,
good.
Lindsay gave me encouragement. So I just received news yesterday that Governor Kelly is going to proclaim August Kansas Breastfeeding Month in honor of National Breastfeeding Month. So just had to share.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
That's awesome. Oh, very good. Any other bright spots? Congratulations for that, Brenda. Okay, if none, the agenda items, as a reminder, are available on the panel SharePoint hub. And so again, that link was sent out to you with the agenda and information for today's meeting. The Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund will have their meeting on August the 2nd from 9 to noon. It is live streamed on the Kansas Children's Cabinet YouTube page if you are interested in viewing the Cabinet meeting. Our next early child recommendations panel is on August 16th at 9 o'clock. Typically, we have opportunities at the end of our panel, our work group for our panel meeting for work groups to break out. This meeting, we haven't established work groups yet. And so we are giving you back an hour of your time, a little bit more for this morning. As I said, our next meeting is going to be on the 16th. On the 16th, we'll have an opportunity to talk about what those work groups are going to be. Then you'll have an opportunity after that to really think about like what groups you want to be on, either during that meeting or afterwards. Lindsay will give you instructions on how that's going to work. This is going to be the schedule, and you should have already received the calendar invites for all of those meetings. Lindsay sends those out at the beginning of the year, so you should already have that on your calendar. If you did not receive that, please let Lindsay know so that way we can make sure that you have that on your schedule. And so again, we do welcome 42 panel members to our 24-25 panel year, with 29 returning and 13 new members. And so that is amazing. And so we thank the 42 members that are here for your commitment and dedication to Kansas children and families, for dedicating, committing your time to our meetings on once a month, and for all of the work that you're going to do within your work group. And we definitely see great things happen from our discussions. And so with that being said, thank you all for the work again that you do. I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of the summer. Enjoy the cold front that we have right now. And when it's not 100-something degrees, it's always a good thing. And so, again, have a wonderful rest of the day and good weekend. So take care, and see you guys later. Bye.
Thank you.